welcome to Wisdom Circles, discussions on menopause transition and other informative, humorous, empowering, sometimes humbling, and often ridiculous stories about aging. My name is Laura Libby, also known as burlesque performer Ophelia Flame, and I'm excited and honored to be your host for these monthly informative discussions. So today, will feature not one, but two of my dearest friends, the talented and delightful dynamic duo, Joe Weldon and Jonny Porkpie. But first, I'd like to share a little bit of how we got to this very moment. So in addition to being a burlesque performer and an instructor for the last 30 years, I'm also a group fitness instructor and a massage therapist. But in spite of my love for anatomy and physiology and for what I felt like was a really deep connection to body awareness, my menopause transition has been a confusing experience with a myriad of symptoms ranging from mild to extreme rather, and that have mostly just been ignored or misdiagnosed by uninformed medical professionals. So suddenly I felt like my whole life had turned upside down, and I felt like I was just slowly, figuratively, and literally disappearing. But what I didn't know then was that this is a really common and powerful feeling during menopause transition, and that the reason so many of us are in the dark about this massive life change has a long history of gatekeeping, misogyny, misinformation, shame, and fear. So now, 8 years into my own menopausal roller coaster, I'm inspired to redefine and demystify aging by empowering women to be seen and heard while finding confidence and pleasure in living at any age. I recently became a certified menopause support coach from Burl Education, and I'm creating my own unique program that I launched just this year. So to clarify, these discussions are for anyone at any age assigned an ovarian system and the folks that love them. By sharing our stories and our inherent wisdom, our open discussions build knowledge, offer tools, resources, and support so we can better navigate our own experiences. And with an estimated 1.1 million people entering into menopause transition annually in the US alone, there's probably a good chance that you or someone you know might have some pressing questions and even some concerns about this physiological, biological, cultural, familial, and spiritual rite of passage. Menopause is a powerful and natural life event. It is not a disease or an affliction that needs to be fixed or overcome. So in general, just a little vocabulary. In general, most people begin perimenopause around the age of 40. Still, it's completely different for every person based on personal health history, even including mental health, such as childhood trauma or PTSD. This is when your hormones begin to shift, and the changes are usually gradual. This can last between 4 years to, I didn't know this, well over a fucking decade. Hello. Symptoms can include, but are not limited to, irregular periods, hot flashes, chills, night sweats, mood changes, weight gain, particularly around the midsection, and slowed metabolism, fatigue, insomnia, brain fog, anxiety, depression, loss of libido, pain during intercourse, vaginal dryness, irritability, moodiness, and feelings of rage. Anybody? Just me? No. Typically, but not always, menopause begins around the age 51. And when it's been 365 days when you've had haven't had a menstrual period. And the ovaries are going into retirement, be that on their own or suddenly at any age by ways of surgery or hysterectomy or medical treatments such as chemotherapy for cancer. So once that shift happens, you may still experience symptoms, but they usually begin to lessen. Post-menopause is when we settle into our new transformative selves, living next to hopefully 20 to 40 years. Menopause transition is the term for the whole wild ride. So today we're going to hear about our guest journey, discuss the physiological and emotional changes that occur during menopause and how they can impact relationships and how to lend support to those that we love. We welcome your questions and comments following what I imagine is going to be an informative and a very lively discussion. So without further ado, Jo Weldon is an expert in the study of contemporary burlesque and women's issues and fashion. Her writing and transcripts of lectures on the history of leopard print have been published in Mental Floss, Time Out New York, and the New York Times. As headmistress of New York School of Burlesque, Jo is the author of the iconic and widely revered Burlesque Handbook and teaches weekly classes and has toured internationally teaching and performing. Miss Weldon combines years of professional experience as an adult entertainer with a deep understanding of women's issues. She's presented media analysis of women's rights in conferences around the country and lobbied at the UN for the inclusion of diverse perspectives on human rights initiatives. Her recent book, Fierce, The History of Leopard Print, is available widely. Please give Jo a warm virtual welcome. Hello, Jo. Hello, Jo. There she
Hi.
is. Hello, welcome. So I know, Jo, that we've had, and I should say also, our friend Jonny is going to be joining us a little while later. Just and while I'm at it, I'll give Jonny a little. Well, let's say hi to Jo first. Hi, Jo. How are you?
Hi.
We are going to have Jonny, who is Jo's partner, is also a burlesque performer, a writer, a producer, and an MC. Jonny Porkpie is both the self-appointed mayor, burlesque mayor of New York, and an occasional candidate for actual mayor of New York City. He is a frequent MC and event producer at the Burlesque Hall of Fame in Las Vegas. Jonny is also Jo's partner, as I mentioned, and will be joining us later to share his experience as an innocent bystander and a loving ally. So, Jo, you and I have had many, many discussions about aging. But honestly, I don't know if you know this, but you really paved the way for my own transition as one of the first people in my age group that I knew had gone through menopause. So I'd love to start out by hearing more about your journey, and when Jonny joins us, he can share his perspective. So tell us how does your menopause journey, how did it begin? Tell us, walk us through it.
Well, I definitely experienced perimenopause, and I quit smoking when I turned 40, like on my 40th birthday. And so I was preparing for that. I was preparing for that sorry, this is so funny now, by taking martial arts classes. I don't know why I thought that would help me with quitting smoking.
Because you can't fucking breathe doing martial arts and smoking at the same time.
Well, no, I thought I would need something extra physical and everything. I was concerned about, my life had already changed a lot physically. I went from working jobs where I was on my feet and very active 4 or 5 nights a week to not as much. And so I was like, all right, I quit smoking. I got to stay active. I got to keep fit. I want to stay strong. Right. And so martial arts, but I was a little bit too angry to be doing that.
That seems like a good fit, actually.
You would think, but I don't know, maybe it was the one I chose. And I even tried, have you ever done capoeira, which isn't really a martial art?
I haven't done it, but I know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was in AA on and off for years, and I really like AA. I don't say that it's the only way to get sober, but I love it, right? But I wasn't going to meetings, and I wasn't smoking, and I was really angry generally. And I was definitely going through perimenopause, definitely. And so
what does that mean? How did you know that you were going through perimenopause?
I didn't at the time.
Okay.
That I found out when I was living with Julie Atlas Muse, and I can't remember what year or what age I was, and I had stopped drinking again, and that helped. But also when I quit smoking, I realized that I had been self-medicating with cigarettes. Like, you don't smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day if you don't have anxiety, I don't think. And so I had this like anxiety from that. And so I was rooming with Julie Atlas Muse, and that's just her name. You say her whole name. I also have a sister named Julie, so I always say my roommate's full name. And I told her, I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. Just, I'm just all over the place. I'm having trouble thinking, and I'm really horny and like all this stuff. And she goes, when was the last time you felt this way? And I said, oh, I've never felt this way before. Wait a minute. High school. I felt this way in high school. And she goes, it's hormones. You're in perimenopause. And she's 10 years younger than I am, but she had experienced this with friends. So, and it just clicked. I knew she was right. And I was in my 40s, and I don't remember exactly when I actually stopped having my period, although I love not having my period. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
It is sort of one
Maybe
less
I'm
thing to
excited,
worry
but I
about.
was, what?
It is sort of one less thing to worry about in the grand scheme of all of our worries. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't have to, it's one, yeah, I don't have to think about it. I mean, there were times when I enjoyed it when I had it, especially like if I was around squeamish men. I'd be like, hey, let me creep you out.
Watch me
Yeah,
now.
that tampon string, like I was that kind of a jerk, but right.
Awesome. So
But
good. So your symptoms were you were having, am I hearing you were having some brain fog?
brain fog, anxiety, just like intense emotions, definitely hormonal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I have a thing that part of my lifelong anxiety and depression disorders is that I clutter when I'm in a bad place.
Hmm.
When I feel like I'm losing control, I clutter. So I was cluttering. I was building piles all over my room.
Mine's literally the exact opposite. I'm like cleaning everything and organizing. Like it's funny how those emotions show up in the physical form, isn't it?
Yeah, and it wasn't easy on everybody around me, the piles of clutter for sure, but I couldn't. I would look at them and go, I don't know what that is.
You gotta do what you gotta do. Well, and can
Yeah.
I get in it? I love that, Joe, that you said like, and I was angry, and I actually was the first time thinking this, that like, can we just get an amen for like Gen X in general, that like that's really not a symptom, that is like when people say like, oh, I when I went into menopause I was angry. No, I've been fucking angry since I was 12. Like it's like you have to like wipe
Yeah.
that symptom of anger and rage. No, we're just like Gen X, we're all like
Oh
anger.
no, from the first Hey Baby, like you said when you were 12, right?
Yeah.
From the first Hey Baby. Well, actually the very first like Hey Baby on the street, I was like, oh, I'm a woman now. And then about by the fourth or fifth one, I was like, oh my God, these 40-year-old guys are yelling at a 12-year-old
Yeah.
girl.
Yep. Yeah. I was just talking to, I know she wouldn't care that I shared this. I was talking to Christina, our friend,
Mhm.
mutual friend Christina, and she was saying that she was somewhere walking down the street, and this is the evolution. She was walking down the street and she saw a construction site. There's a bunch of guys out there, and she was like, because we get in our body. We're like, okay, here it comes. I got to get ready for it, prepare, how am I going to respond, just armoring yourself. And she said she walked by and she goes, not a peep. And she was like, well, oh yeah, really nothing.
It is the second best thing about aging. Less street harassment.
It's
Everybody told, because I bitched about it all the time, and everybody thought I was like bragging, and I'm like, bragging?
no.
Like,
Although I've heard like
it
culturally,
happens to everybody I know. Like, what?
I've heard though culturally, it's definitely like a US thing. I mean, our fucked up ideas of, youth and, beauty are wrapped up so tight. But, I know that I've had other friends who have shared that, live in other parts of the world where it's like, no, woman's a woman. You're, it's not, but certainly that's my experience too, that it's like in our Western, in the US, it's
Well, I have a saying about it, right? I
okay.
can tell the difference, right? Because like when I lived in New Orleans, there's like this stoop culture and you walk around and people are like, "Hey, looking good today." And you can just that's it. But what was bothering me was that they weren't trying to give attention to me. They were trying to take attention from me, not the people in New Orleans, but the people I'm complaining about.
Yeah.
And I could tell the difference because when they didn't get the attention, they would start being abusive.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Well,
I don't think it's like it's not a gray area. It's not that difficult to tell.
yeah. Yeah. And we know, like you said, starting at what age, 10, 12,
Well,
for
for me, yeah.
sure. We know,
I
we
mean,
know
I
how it
remember.
feels. We know how it feels in our bones. Okay, so back to it, Joe. So you're starting to have symptoms, and then you said that you don't really remember when you had your last period. But and that it's sort of nice. Some people feel like it's interesting. I've sort of always been indifferent about my period. Yeah, I haven't really had two terribly difficult periods. But it really wasn't until later in life where I was like really saw my period as like power, that it is like we are the portals, like nothing gets on this earth unless it's through us, or another portal, another female portal, and I never imagined that I would have this sort of sense, a little sense of mourning, a little sense of missing it. And um for like a second. And then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I can move on from that. But I just think it's sort of interesting, that like it is something that has been a part of our lives for so long. It's totally normal if people feel the opposite of being like, oh, I really didn't even like my period, but it so feels weird or it feels a little empty. But in some cultures, I love that they use the term that as we are give of our blood, we are giving life to others, creating things, and as we keep our blood, it becomes what they refer to as wise blood, and so we're keeping our wisdom. And so I
I
love
like that.
yeah, I
I
like that.
enjoyed my period at times. I just, and I thought about it somewhat the way you're talking about it at times, but it was a journey. Like I never landed anywhere on it. And I definitely landed on not missing it now that it's gone.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. Well, how did you feel? Can you tell us a little bit about, like, did you seek any medical, like, in your annuals? Like, did you feel supported by your medical professionals, or great that you felt at least, that Julie Atlas Muse gave you the heads up of like, what, dude, change is happening.
Yeah.
What about what else?
Um, I did not have health insurance at the time. I went several years without it, and that would have been a good time to have it. But my older sister told me that because I'm lucky, so I have an older and a younger sister, by like 6 years on either side. And my older sister told me about how when she lives in LA, and when she uh started to go through menopause, she had road rage, which she never had before. And that is not her. Like she's just not like that. Um, but she had road rage and she went to her doctor and they put her on hormones and she's still on them, hormone replacement.
Mhm.
And she told me to get it. She's like,
Mm.
go get it. I was like, I don't have a doctor right now. And I just wasn't together about that. Um, I would now, but I didn't then. I did like a lot of meditation. I went to a lot of AA meetings. I know that doesn't sound like medical help. But I didn't really have a medical system in place for myself at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And hormone replacement therapy is not for everybody. It's not always a good fit. I'm glad
Yeah,
that it was for your sister. And you said she's
definitely was for her.
still taking it. Yeah. What about your
Yeah,
older sister?
my older sister is the one taking it.
Oh, I see. The younger sister hasn't maybe gone through.
No, she's a whole other story.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Well, yeah, that can be challenging. I mean, for what it's worth, Joe, even if you'd gone, it doesn't necessarily mean you'd get the answers that you want. I hate to say such disparaging things about our medical community, but it's disturbing that to know that it's really been like the blind leading the blind. My experience, I did go. I was very fortunate to have health insurance and went for easily 8 years of different symptoms, none of which I knew were related to menopause. And they, including, I think you remember when I had Bell's palsy twice on opposite
Yes.
sides of my face, within 3 months of one another, and did a whole, did MRIs with and without contrast, a whole panel of autoimmune issues. And they're like, well, here's some steroids, and not a single person said,
Right.
hey, let's, like you're 45, maybe you're in perimenopause, which means your body is full of inflammation, and probably what is suppressing the seventh cranial nerve, that's what moves your face. So let's check in on that. Not one. They're like, take some B12. Like, it's fucking bonkers that, like, I think it's changing, and that's good. But oftentimes, even when women come in with menopausal symptoms, up until now, they, would be like, here's some birth control pills and some Xanax.
Yeah.
P.S. If any of your doctors say, here's some Xanax and birth control pills, find somebody else. Find another practitioner. There are people out there. Email me. I will help you find one. So what about, can you tell us, like, how did you feel? So you mentioned that, like, when your hormones were changing, and some people do call it menopause, like the second puberty, and you shared that you had a change in your libido, like you felt super horny. So, like, can you share a little bit more about that? Because oftentimes people are the opposite.
No, I was just ravenous. I was just ravenous. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, as in high school, right? Just
You, Joe?
yeah,
You?
yeah. It's amazing that I really waited until after high school to have a sex life because it was on my mind. Um, the people in my high school were such jerks is really why.
Yeah.
I was like, oh God, if I hook up with any of these people, I'll have to deal with them afterwards. Yeah.
Well, what else, if anything, like, what about, did it change for, I mean, I feel like, it'll be nice to have Jonny here to at least defend himself, but because I think you two were together then, yes, when you were going through menopause?
We've been together for 13 years, so that's, what year is it? It's 2003. So we got together around 2010 when I was in my later 40s, which was the time that the anxiety and everything really peaked.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
How was that how did that, because being super horny and having anxiety are sort of an duality, right? Like, how did that change? Did it change your feelings of intimacy? Like, what was that like?
Um, well, we weren't like committed until a few years later. Like we didn't commit to each other for a few years later. We were dating other people and
Yeah.
chatting around, and I went to New Orleans for a few years and lived there. And but we have been, dating the entire time, just not committed, until later. And I think because I kind of knew what was going on, and he's going to come in not knowing anything I've said, so I don't want to talk too much because
Pause. We
it's
should
not
pause.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, I shouldn't really say anything about him really and
Yeah.
what went on with us until he's here so he knows what's been said.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
sounds good.
'Cause then
Well,
he'll come in and either repeat or contradict me, or I mean it's okay if he contradicts me, but
oh, I guarantee he will contradict you.
he
um,
has his own version of events, but
It's true. Fair enough. Most partners do.
yeah.
Well, can you share a little more about your about your physicality. Like, I'm just diving right in. I know I've known you long and well enough to know that you're not really shy about anything, which is one of the many things I love about you. But can you share a little bit about your physicality? Like, many people, like, what about your hair, your texture of your skin, or vaginal tissue, or any
All that
any of
stuff.
that stuff?
Um, so my hair has always been a really challenging texture. Like I basically have textured hair. Like it won't do most things. Like people are always like, "Oh, your hair looks great on stage." I'm like, for 5 minutes, and then it changes. It does what it does. Which doesn't mean that my hair is awful. It's that I've never learned to manage it, right? But as I got older and it turned gray, it's white now. And I keep thinking I want to grow it out because I actually I love your hair, but I'm not ready to deal with the process of growing out. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not nervous about being gray, but I'm nervous about having, 2-inch roots.
Mm-hmm. That's what I've always said. I can be red
Yeah.
or gray. I don't want to be both. I mean, this is
Yeah.
sort of, a
I like
different
that. I
story.
love it. Well, I've seen you grow it out and I love it, but mine anyway. So the texture is really challenging, right? So it got coarser and harder to style. Um, but generally I just started because I live an alternative lifestyle. So I just started wearing hair pieces more and um, but I felt really glamorous in a way I didn't when I was younger. And I think it's because um so when I was younger, I was like very fit and, dancing 4 days a week. Like I looked like I danced. And, that was already starting to change when I quit smoking and going through perimenopause. And, I felt kind of more glamorous because I was able to project out more than have things projected onto me, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Because I was so used to people kind of going, well, you look like this, so you're like this. And I sort of, I fell out of that. It's not debutante. What is it? Category for when they in movies, the ingenue.
Oh, yes, the
Like,
original.
yeah, that shit was over. And people project onto younger people, whatever they think they are. And I was eccentric, but I was mostly wearing like vintage clothes and stuff. And I had a little bit of an identity crisis because I had to size up enough that none of my old clothes fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been collecting vintage clothes for a long time. And, like over the years, I had to size up like a couple times before, but this was like drastic and in a very short period of time. And mainly like when I quit smoking, all of a sudden I had calf muscles and stuff like that. So between that and the hormones, I was going up rapidly. And I was really sad because so much of my identity was tied up in those vintage clothes. But all of a sudden I was like, well, I can just be whatever super glamorous is. I was just like cutting holes in pieces of sequin fabric and throwing it over my head and putting on big fake eyelashes and just showing up.
Yeah.
Right. Because I didn't like my idea of glamour was less tied to um looking a way that people perceived a way. Am I making any sense?
Total sense. Makes total.
Okay, yeah. I felt a sense of freedom in not being so tied to that sort of mainstream look. My body was changing. So I knew that my body had changed enough that if I went to apply to a strip joint, even though my face hadn't yet changed that much, that they wouldn't hire me. Right.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't have to think about that anymore. Does that make any sense? Because I know that
Sense. It makes absolute sense because it's about, it's a big thing of it is our identity. And, of course, our clothing. You said something a while ago that I really loved. Hello, Johnny Porkpie, by the way. Um,
there.
you said something that I loved, and I might be quoting you wrong, but you talked we talked a while ago about having like clothes trauma or like fashion trauma or something, or was that the word that you used?
Well, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dramatic, but there is this like sense of mourning, and sometimes about our old identities. And you know, I think that's a crossroads for a lot of women of being at this
Yeah.
place of like, okay, am I gonna just latch on to this old identity, which I think often happens where, you know, people can become angry and resentful and feel very lost and sort of miss this opportunity to be like, okay, well, if I'm not that, you know, who am I now? Who am I becoming? Who do I want to be? You know, is really
Yeah.
can be an exciting opportunity.
Well, I had fashion trauma my whole life because, like, when I was in bars, I knew how to dress. When I was working as a sex worker, I loved my work costumes and I loved what I was wearing because I had never in my life, even when I was in high school, you know, and I was a punk rocker, I was basically dressing to go out. You know, like people in high school were always like, "What are you dressed for?" I'm like, "Party." You know, and I don't know how to go to the grocery store. What do you, I mean, now I live upstate part-time and I've learned to wear sweatpants. Highly recommended.
I
But
have
I
an
had,
all new respect for mod. I'm just saying. All those collections of caftans, like
and yeah,
caftan because you can. Just saying.
well, I do. But my fashion icon, even when I was a kid, was, you know, one of them. I mean, I've got like 7,000 of them, but was always Endora on
Oh
Bewitched.
yes.
And you know, the thing about Bewitched is that the actors, for the most part, most of the clothes were from their closets. Not
Oh,
all of them,
know
but
that.
most of them,
Yeah.
right? And you know, the actress who played Endora was a very strong personality on and off screen, and she would wear these big rainbow leopard print caftans and all this stuff. I was like, idol, yeah, you know.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about her. I also have this almost like visceral response to remembering her that's just like, oh, she was just like just the right amount of wicked. You know, she wasn't like cute wicked. She was just like wise wicked. And yeah, I loved her. I loved her.
Yeah.
Well, hello, Jonathan. How are you? Drive safely. Yes, please.
Okay, there we go. Got off mute without crashing into a tree.
Okay, please
Hey,
don't.
baby.
Well, we're just talking about the menopause. I know. Welcome to our knitting circle.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to mansplain menopause to everybody.
It is not mansplaining. Listen, you are both two of my beloved friends, and you know, you having known you for many years, I am always very grateful for your insights and both of you, and you are a wonderful ally. And when I thought about doing a wisdom circle on relationships, you two were the first that came to mind, that would at least have the courage and the balls enough to want to spill the beans on your experience. And certainly it's different for everyone, but I'm just grateful that you're both here and willing to share. So Jonny, just to catch you up, we heard a little bit of Joe's story and how she started creating piles of stuff, and how Julie, Atlas Muse, gave her the heads up. And fast forward to now, we were just had started. We started talking about relationships and intimacy. And then we thought, oh wait, we better not go down this road until, you know, Jonny's here to defend himself or contradict Joe.
Absolutely.
So Joe, we were talking. I'm gonna head down the road, and then Jonny can interject because we started talking about the physiological changes, and so we talked about hair,
Mm-hmm.
and then Joe, you were going to share and about just more physicality, like how did you notice any? Because so many women, this was not my experience until later. My gynecologist kept saying like, "Do you have any vaginal dryness?" And I was like, "Is that a thing?" No, until I did, and it was like, "Oh shit, that's a thing," you know. So you don't know, you don't know. Is that your? Have you had?
Jonny, did you have any vaginal dryness?
Not that I detected, but I haven't been to the gynecologist in a while either. So,
Well, I recommend you should go annually, Jonny. But
oh, okay. Can I just see the Barbie movie again? Would that count?
yes, that counts.
it's interesting to me because I'm pretty sure you started going through it very soon after we got together. Am I wrong about that?
You're right. Yeah.
So most of the
We
time
hooked
we've
up.
been after we hooked up, yeah. So it's, I mean, I it was still in the getting to know you phase for us a little bit. I mean, even though it was a couple of years in, but it didn't feel. I more understood it by you talking about it than I perceived it as a significant change.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had, I mean, that what they call vaginal atrophy, which I wish they would work on the name for that.
Such a rude word. It's like
so
pregnancy. Yeah, come on, you can do better.
Yeah, which is tightness. Because
Mm-hmm.
I've always been, I'm fine. Like I've always loved lube, and I've never been shy about using lube. So if I had vaginal dryness, I didn't really know.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this tightness, and I was like, what is, and I think I felt it, but Jonny, you said you didn't really feel the difference.
Well, I mean, there were times you were less enthusiastic once we got started than usual, and it seemed to be because of that discomfort. But I mean, it also seemed like the cure to that was to have more sex, so that was pretty good,
Yeah, stay dilated.
As cures go, I mean, I was happy to participate in that one.
Yeah. Well, they gave me a cream, but the thing about the cream is like I don't want to get it on him.
Right, because isn't it an estrogen cream?
It's an estrogen cream, and also I just don't like it. So I've looked for other workarounds. But yeah, and it wasn't a feeling of like, like I have friends who said they felt pain. It wasn't pain, it was like different.
Yeah,
it was different.
That word vaginal atrophy is just awful. But
I know it's horrifying.
Is really real.
It's still there. It hasn't atrophied. It's still there.
It's still there. Like it's, yeah, I think it's like you've got like a ghost limb, you've got ghost vagina. Like, no.
There's not less of it.
No. But there is, what's interesting, what's fascinating is that like what I didn't know then, I know now is how impactful estrogen is in our bodies. Like there are receptors everywhere in our bodies, most of which are in our vagina and in our brain. And so when we start to have less in our vaginal tissue, that it does start to thin. It's even between, the vagina and the anus. And so it's like, it can be really painful, and it can be, there can be bleeding. And again, like you said, I love that you hit the nail on the head, is lube. For sure.
Also, like the feeling of skin thinning, definitely, I knew that was happening.
Yeah.
I definitely knew that was happening. And I guess that's what they're saying the atrophy is.
Yes. It's remarkable to me that is news to us, and that we're not told that. No one gives you a heads up, which is one of the reasons I feel so strongly to start normalizing these conversations. And, so our, next gen people who are going through menopause have, are informed and feel supported and are even celebrated. I mean, so much more could have been avoided, for people in their, in that experience, with just a little bit of a heads up.
Yeah,
would be
I
good.
think so too. I feel like the internet is, it's both a blessing and a curse, because if you find the right source, there's loads of information. But if you find the wrong one, there's loads of disinformation.
Yeah.
Well, for medical stuff, the Mayo Clinic's pretty reliable and pretty respectable. So that's a good one to start your research, just to get a basis in people who actually are doctors telling you stuff, rather than someone who heard it from their friend's aunt.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
but people go on Quora.
yeah. Yes, but the wild thing is that because women's health, not a lot of research or information actually has been out there. And so it really was only within the last, so you probably, there was like we've talked about this before, the Wall Street Journal did a big story called Women Have Been Misled about Menopause, and it was all about this research that has was virtually the Bible, called it's called the WHI study, which declared that menopause, that rather estrogen caused cancer. And so nobody could have any estrogen, and it was not true. Actually, was really, the findings were very misconstrued. They found now that no, actually women can benefit greatly when it's a good fit. And so it's remarkable that really only, I think in the 80s, even into the mid 90s, they were still giving women Premarin, which also had phenobarbital in it. It was like, what the fuck. So really, I mean, thankfully, and I agree, Jonny, like, oh, I think we lost him, that that things are changing, more research has been done, but really only until the mid 90s is any actual really good, decent research been done around around menopause and estrogen. And so we can dig all we want, but if we're giving misinformation that's everywhere, Mayo Clinic or not, because I'm certain the Mayo Clinic even was toting that WHI study. So but it's science, and science change and things evolve, and that's okay. But I'm just so grateful that there's more talk and more discussion about it. And yeah, anyway, so and I think talking with each other, like, I love that that Julie was your heads up, and that's often what it happens. It's so, I think it's less than 1 in 4 medical professionals have more than 2 hours of training about menopause at all. They don't know, they don't understand. It's disturbing to me. Again, it's changing.
Yeah, I mean, I had a doctor that had gone through it and knew nothing.
Absolutely.
Awful. She was awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was just reflecting that my actual, even though I went to medical professionals for years going like, oh, I'm having migraines. Oh, I have anxiety. I have depression. I'm having heart palpitations. Like, there's at least well over 50 symptoms of in perimenopause that are totally often misdiagnosed. And it really wasn't until I broke my wrist ice skating that led me to have a DEXA scan, which said you have our early stages of osteopenia, and which is due to a lack of estrogen. Let's see what we could do for you. And so that, it's sort of like silver linings of shitty experience, bring you to a better place. But anyway, it's fascinating how everybody has their sort of own unique ride, and I'm grateful that it's beginning to change. And being able to have open conversations like this, being able to share our wisdoms with each other, because we don't know it all, but together we're stronger. So yeah, do you have any? Sorry,
I was just gonna say about Jonny is because when Jonny and I, even when Jonny and I were not committed, he's just a very supportive person. And I never felt self-conscious. Like, I've been with men who really would have reacted badly to the amount of information I was sharing with them. I would have done it anyway, but I mean, they wouldn't have been supportive, or they would have been repulsed, or they would have been frightened, or some other thing, because I just know that's so. And Jonny never made me feel like I couldn't talk about it. He never made me feel like it was a problem to him. And I don't know how, I know I have a few friends who have supportive partners in that way, but I've known a lot of friends who have not. So,
well, and I think it's important to share. I think that there are many women who, I mean, we've talked about this in other circles, that it really is our mothers and grandmothers generations that, would institutionalize women for menopause, for going through menopause. And so gold star, Jonny, gold star
yeah.
for you.
But I remember when Hillary Clinton was running for president, and evidently people know nothing about menopause. They're like, "What if she goes through a change of life in office?" I was like, "She's on the other side." But
yeah,
that,
exactly.
like that would come up. Like, women aren't trustworthy when they go through menopause. You can't take them seriously, and you can't.
It's all patriarchal
respect
bullshit.
their minds or their decisions. They're literally nuts. And I'm like, I wasn't nuts. I was processing a lot of intense emotions, but I knew what reality was.
Right. Yep.
Plus, at that point in our relationship, we were processing a lot of intense emotions anyway.
Yeah.
So, I can't take all the credit. Most of my friends growing up were women. So, I got it. And I heard about yeast infection starting at 16 from friends who were just like, "Hey, I feel like shit today." So it's like, I think, obviously if more people grew up with friends of various genders, then they would be less ill-informed when having to deal with these things.
Well, and it's the shame, right, that keeps people from having the open conversations and having that intimacy and that vulnerability, so I applaud your teenage friends also, Jonny. That's awesome. Can you tell us about, Jonny, what was your experience like? Just a little bit about what your experience was like in your observing Joe, and is there anything advice that you would give to fellow allies other than, just being open and communicating?
I was thinking a lot about this specifically because you asked me to be on this with Joe. And I mean, I think it's the same advice I'd give to people trying to navigate any part of a relationship, right? It's like, listen, be empathetic, help when asked. I think especially if you are not a person inclined to go through menopause physically, I think a great thing not to do is look up stuff on the internet and tell your partner things for them. That's a really good one to avoid, even though I did look up some stuff so I would feel more informed, but it wasn't like, it was more of an, oh, I read that too when Joe brought it up, rather than, and maybe once in a while, I just found this, are you interested in reading it? But that's the thing. I mean, it's how we've gotten through 13 almost, is it now almost 14 that we're going on years of a relationship? Like, we try to be nice to each other, and I think that's, as a supportive person in any situation, trying to be nice to each other is a pretty damn good start. In terms specifically of menopause, I can only repeat what Joe told me to tell her to remind people, which was to take the drugs.
Oh, well,
did I freeze?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's not always a good fit for everyone. If if you have a history of breast cancer, or if you have smoking, and that sort of thing. But I mean, we're going to do a whole wisdom circle just on HRT. It comes up every hormone replacement therapy. It comes up in every wisdom circle. And there's so much to be said. It needs multiple wisdom circles. But, for me, it's changed everything. Like, it is, I was never going to be who I was, but I just feel like myself again. And it's life-changing. Like, I feel like I can be around for a few more years. So I would agree. I also did a little digging, because though I have a partner who is also, our rule is to be nice to each other. And as you know, he's pretty nice. But I just, we've sort of worked it out in our own way as well. I mean, he's been very supportive and listens and is just like, whatever you need. But I never do I take that for granted, but I went and looked. I did my own little digging of some top tips to support your partner in menopause, and there were some good ones I hadn't actually thought of. And one that you mentioned is educate yourself and learn about the symptoms. I think often women don't realize that there's symptoms that they're having, like fatigue or anxiety, Joe, or depression, that are actually symptoms of perimenopause and the loss of progesterone and estrogen. Like you said, Jonny, I love that. Listen, and encourage open communication. 3 is to adjusting expectations of someone when they're really going through a lot. It's a physiological, emotional, often spiritual experience for people. Reduce emotional and physical friction. Lube is your friend. We talked about that. And I think giving people, I love this one, give them free reign of the thermostat. Because those hot flashes, man, they can be a killer. I love that you tipped on this, Jonny. Don't call attention to people's symptoms. Nobody likes to hear, what you should do, or, you're being crabby again. Not helpful, right? Encourage and support self-confidence. Sometimes we can feel a little down in the dumps when we're in a transition or, having some weight gain or, as we said, physical changes. I think that that really try to limit that guilt, and of taking somebody withdrawing personally, I think was a good tip. And don't diminish their experience, because I think that is what medical professionals do best. There's so many women I know feel unheard and, oh, you're fine. It's a breeze. And also I think it's great for partners and allies to get the support that they need too. I mean, maybe it's helpful for them to talk to a therapist, or whomever, a friend or a family. So those are the top 10 tips I looked up, which I thought were some good ones. So I would love, did either of you, Joe, or John? Oh, wait. Oh, there she is. Wait, Jonny, I'm going to repin you.
I'm back. Sorry.
Hello, and you're in the light. We can see your face. Are you across the room from each other?
No, I'm in the studio.
Oh, okay.
We have 2 structures on the property. He's in the other one right now.
Got it. Awesome. Well, did you have any other nuggets that you'd like to share? I would like to give our friends, if they have any questions or thoughts to add, like to give them an opportunity.
I would just say, in addition to not diminishing the experience, don't exaggerate it either. So that being the sort of thing that's like blaming literally everything that you notice on menopause. And, it may all be true, but it's certainly not your place as the partner to point it out. And it usually isn't.
Yeah, sir, go ahead.
I was finished.
Oh, okay. I felt like I interrupted you. Yeah, I think that there is, it's funny, that's the joke in my house too, is that menopause is the reason for everything. And you know what? It pretty much fucking is. It's the truth. I mean, what estrogen does in both, male, just human bodies, estrogen plays a tremendous role in whatever gender you are. And your brain function and so many things. And if, we just think that if we were to treat people who were, suffering from, just general depression or recovering from a surgery or something, we would never treat them the same way that we often treat people who are going through a decade transition. It's not something that just happens quick either. So, but yeah, those are good points. Thank you. Any other nuggets, Joe?
I mean, I hear what you were just saying. I think a lot about hormones now because I also have a thyroid disorder. And you know, I had to go on medication for that, and that was affecting me in a lot of the same ways, interestingly, like fatigue and anxiety at the same time. Yay, you know. I feel like hormones are really, I'm sure there's more studies on them, but I feel like they're not discussed in a, like they're discussed as problems, and like why don't they just like talk about them? I feel like doctors and people like that. I feel that
hormones are very medicalized, and they're hard, and they, like, doctors and the medical profession, it's like that's where some of the gatekeeping bothers me. I'm with you because, you know, we can handle it, you know, like, I mean, the endocrine system is, yes, a wide, vast universe of strangeness, you know, but that doesn't mean that we can't handle it, you know, or understand it. And so I totally agree with you that it's like, you know, hormones are literally who's running the show.
Yeah, I think about hormones being like an integrated into the self and the perception of the self. And I feel that that's really underappreciated. And when I do hear it talked about, it's often treated as what hormones can we throw at whatever symptom of hormone imbalance there is. And I'm like, well, what if there's another way to manage it than to just shift hormones around?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I'm down with that. Well, I'd love if anybody has any of our friends who have any questions or thoughts or anything you'd like to add. You can unmute yourself.
Just going to throw something out there. I'm of the camp and have always been of the camp that, of course, you know, hormones are going to give you cancer. Don't do that. Everyone in my family, all the women, oh God, no, you're going to tough through it. Don't you dare, it'll kill you. And since I've started coming to these wisdom circles, I've started more conversations around HRT and realized I'm so freaking missing out. Like, what the fuck? I have every single symptom you guys talk about and have for at least a good 10 years now. So I think I'm all about it. I'm ready to go to the doctor. I just want to say thank you for being an inspiration, really.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, you know, my pleasure. And have you read that 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 Wall Street Journal? It's an easy, just Google it though. It's called it's Wall Street Journal, and it's women have been misled about menopause, and it's really the biggest expose on that WHI study, which told all of our mothers and grandmothers that estrogen period causes cancer. In
Right.
some women it does, in some women it does, but the benefits that that a lot of other women can gain from, you know, cardiovascular health to bone density, like all of these things, particularly when you're starting in perimenopause and into, you know, your early stages of menopause, huge impact, and if it's the right fit. So definitely I would recommend finding a physician who will do a blood panel and see what your hormone levels are. Most insurance will cover estrogen, either will cover estrogen or and progesterone, which if you have a uterus, you have to take both to protect. The progesterone is is preventative for cervical cancer. But taking the both, if you, like, as I said, if you have uterus. And then some places will also do prescribe testosterone, and usually in a cream, which is typically not covered because, you know, women don't need testosterone, you know. So but yeah, and you just feel free to private message me if you you know, send me an email or something. We can talk more about it. I'm happy to help. But
thank you.
my pleasure. Yeah, of course.
I think it's okay to be critical of something and have caveats and not demonize it, you know, go, well, there are concerns. It may not be for you, but it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Joe. And, you know, I have to say that I thought that I had my own judgment, honestly, that I sort of made up, I guess, that that taking hormones was like another way for the, you know, the medical world to keep me from aging. You know, that it was like another way to manipulate women into being youthful, because we're only valuable during our reproductive, youthful, beautiful years, right? And so I really felt like I had this judgment that it was sort of selling out, and that it was like I was determined to, like, you know, I didn't need that, you know, and it's like I'm gonna get through menopause. And I got my fucking ass kicked for like 8 years, where finally I was just like, so, you know, I don't know how long I will take it, but it's helped me get to a point where I'm like, okay, you know, I'm returning to building like my just bone strength, you know, this like not just like, you know, yeah, I mean, I can sleep for more than 3 hours a night, you know, I mean, so anyway, yeah, thank you. Any other comments or nuggets to share? Yeah. Hello? Yeah, or you can't
You're talking to me.
Oh, Ans, yeah, go for it.
Hi. The sleep thing. Interesting. I had not equated that at all. And that is like, oh my God, such a challenge, and has been for a while. And
Yeah, big time sleep deprivation. Joe, was that your experience at all?
Oh yeah, sleep, weird dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
so
went
being told by somebody who's sort of in the more sort of Eastern or woo-woo side of the medical world, like just try the black cohosh for a while. Like, would you even go down that road?
I went down that road.
You
Evening
did.
primrose, like all of
Sure.
it. I did all of it, you know, and melatonin, and you know, it's just it is it's not, it didn't work for me. It works for some people. And again, when I was like, I'm not going to do those things, of course, and you know me, I'm total woo, you know.
Right. Me too.
And so that would have been my preference, but it did not work for me. And
Yeah.
you know, studies have shown that just a single night of disturbed sleep will fuck you up on every way, you know, like your stamina, your cognition, like all of these things. So like, and I think of, you know, I used to pride myself and like, I only need 4 hours of sleep, you know. It was like, sleep when you're dead, you know. No, like that is like the one of the fundamental things of really this transition is rest. And it's like so little that women have in their 40s, you know, when you're like in your career and you're with your family, you know, like it is just the worst timing. Like, could you have menopause be, you know, a little later? I don't know.
It's a little later. Yeah.
Interesting little tidbit, and we can wrap it up. But did you know that only human women or humans born with an ovarian system and a couple of types of whales are the only animals that go through menopause?
What a great place to end that.
What a great, I know, it's weird, right? Like, what the fuck?
What the fuck?
And there's some theories on that that are out there, which is really interesting, that actually the role of grandmother in the tribe plays a great part in supporting community, which is really, and I think it's called like, you know, the grandmother hypothesis or something like that. Anyway, it's sort of fascinating.
Can I just say one more thing?
Please.
Okay.
Are you going to tell the whale joke?
No.
No. Tell it now.
No, you want to hear the whale joke?
Yeah, tell us what you're going to say and then tell us the whale joke.
Okay. I was thinking about that line in the Barbie movie, which I have sort of a love-hate relationship with, which I think is an appropriate response for almost anybody. But there's a line where the mother, Ruth Handler,
I still haven't seen it, but yeah.
It's not much of a spoiler.
I don't think it will be.
Yeah, so the mother says, it's a mother's, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's like, it's a mother's place to stand still so her daughter can move ahead. And I was so, I have no children, but
you were still pissed off by that line.
I was pissed off on my mother's behalf, honestly. You know, I mean, my mom is gone, but I remember being a kid and having fantasies about how her life could be awesome, you know, because I didn't like my stepfather. And
yeah, I don't.
Like, maybe she married a movie star. Maybe I'll write one a letter and say, hey, you should marry my mom. She's awesome. Party, 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 mom.
I don't love that line either. I don't love that line either. You know, I mean,
no, it's a terrible.
I think that's the common misconception is that menopause is the end, when the truth is it's actually the fucking beginning, because women have spent the whole first half of their life, right? I see some applause there. You know, it is the time to, you know, when we talked before of like giving, now is the turning inwards. And, you know, I'm telling you, that drop of progesterone, that comfy, nice hormone that makes you tolerant, is like, fuck this, I'm out, I'm doing what I want to do and who I want to be, and it's to be celebrated.
Yeah, I totally went, I don't care if I'm relevant. I don't care. I just don't care.
Right. Love it. All right, any other nuggets? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? Okay, whale joke. Joe, go.
Tell the whale joke.
Maybe Jonny has to tell the whale joke.
All right, there's two whales sitting at a bar.
Naturally.
And one of them says, I don't know, I haven't told it in like a decade. And the other whale says, man, you are wasted. The whale joke.
That's the whale joke.
That is a perfect way to end our wisdom circle, because that is some wise wisdom to share, Joe. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Well, what a lovely, lovely evening. Thank you for joining us. And I'm just very grateful for your time. And, you know, lastly, just tell your stories, ask your questions, and share your wisdom. Thank you, Joe and Jonny, for sharing your experience. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next Wisdom Circle. Mwah.